Hi everyone, before we start the tutorial, let me introduce your educator. So we have Shrikant, a senior front-end engineer from Microsoft, and today you're going to be building an end-to-end React app with Shrikant. You are going to use React functional components, CSS, React routes, and OneEntry CMS for backend. And thanks a lot to OneEntry for making the backend part so simple for us to implement, and we can just focus on the front-end part. Now watch the tutorial till the end and give us feedbacks in the comment section, because we are going to create a lot of tutorials for you and we need feedback for that. All of these tutorials are going to come on LearnYard's official channel, the link of which I will provide in the description. Now let's continue with the tutorial.
And welcome to LearnYard. I'm Shrikant. Today we are going to be building an e-commerce website to sell shoes. We're going to be using React.js for the front end and Headless CMS called as OneEntry for the backend. To check out OneEntry, please click on the link in the description below. OneEntry CMS is a headless CMS that helps you create and manage your content. So if you are a front-end engineer and you are not an expert on the backend, it's very easy to create and manage content, and it still exposes the APIs that we would need to build our cool looking front ends. So let's dive into the code and get started. What we are going to be building today is an e-commerce website to sell shoes. So as you can see here, we have the dark mode theme, and on load of the page, we have this cool looking animation. We have the cards to render the products on the page. We have the filters here, sneakers, boots, and home, which filter the products for us. The tech stack that we are going to be using is React.js for the front end with TypeScript and Headless CMS OneEntry on the back end. The prerequisites would be to ensure that you have Node and NPM installed on your machine. To check the Node and NPM on your machine, type node-v, which would give you the Node version, and npm-v to check your npm version. If you do not have Node and npm installed on your machine, please visit nodejs.org and install the version of Node that is right for your machine here. Also ensure to install the code editor Visual Studio. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. You can use any code editor of your choice. Visual Studio is one of the most popular editors out there. Now, to move on, we are going to start building the project now. So the first thing that we would need to do is ensure we have a folder created for your project, of course, and let's cd into the project. So open your terminal and cd into the folder like I have. To create a new React app, you would need to type npx create React app and your app name. So I'm going to call it Shopify. Please provide a project name of your choice in lowercase. And the template that we are going to be using is TypeScript. So template would be TypeScript, right? So enter. So this would start creating the React app for us. So as you can see, we are getting the bootstrapped installations and the project ready for us. So as you can see, we are installing React, React DOM, and React scripts and all the other dependencies that we need. So this command is super powerful. So it helps us create the ready-made React app for us. Let's wait till the installation is completed. Cool, we have the project ready. So let's start with the commands that are suggested over here. So cd into the folder. So I'm going to cd into the folder and npm start. Let's see what's going to happen, right? So as I open the new folder and I'm going to hit localhost 3000, as you can see, the information on the screen is please visit the localhost 3000. It's hosted at localhost 3000. So I'm going to visit localhost 3000. And as we can see, we have the base React app created for us. The next thing that we need to do is start editing our application to look more and more like our final application, right? So let's get started. So to open a folder right from the terminal, you can type code dot and it would open up the Visual Studio on your terminal. So let me walk you through some of the quick extensions that I have here. ESLint, GitHub Copilot, Live Server, Prettier, and ESLint. These are some of the extensions that we commonly use as a front-end developer, and it would be good to have. It is not a mandatory installation for this project. It's just a good to have. So getting into the folder structure, as we can see, we have a public folder, a node modules folder, and a source folder in main. So we also have a package JSON. A package JSON is the root of the application. It gives you all the installations, the dependencies, the dev dependencies of the project. So let's just quickly walk through the project. So the name of the application, as we have given, is Shopify. Is it a private application? For now it is yes. We have certain dependencies that were bootstrapped into the application when we created the app. Some of them are React, React DOM, React scripts, etc., including TypeScript. We also have some of the scripts. These are the commands that we start the application with. So npm run start would run the application in local. This is to build the application and test the application. Moving on to the source folder. So as we can see, what we saw in the application was edit source app.tsx, right? So let's find that file. As we can see, the file is over here, and that is the text that we saw on the screen, right? Edit source apps.tsx. So this is some dummy text that is created in the project. We would need to start editing this project now to make our final app. So I'm going to start by cleaning up this file and then getting to start with writing the code of how our app should look like. Some of the things that we would need to do though is to start creating the data on the CMS. The next thing we would need to do is ensure we have a OneEntry CMS account created.
I hope you guys are following the tutorial. Now, before moving ahead, you need to create an account on OneEntry. I will provide the link in description. You can go and create the account and use the coupon code LearnYard. With this coupon code, you will get the study plan free for 3 months. So what is OneEntry CMS? CMS means content management system. So basically it's going to handle your backend functionalities and the data part so that you can just focus on the front end. It's a front end tutorial, right? And if you are a front end developer, you might be using OneEntry CMS for your future applications as well, because it's going to make your backend very simple and it's very flexible. It do not have any plugins and it supports both mobile applications and website. OneEntry CMS is one of the best out there. You can even use it in your production level applications. So you can check out the pricing and all for production level application. It is pretty affordable for the functionalities and the server capabilities that it provides. Now let's continue the tutorial.
So to create an account for yourself, go to account.oneentry.cloud and register yourself an account. So to register an account, you would need to provide your mobile number, your name, and your email. Once you have registered your account, you should be able to log in like I'm already doing it here. So provide your number to get a code. You should be able to log into your new account. Let's create a new project. I'm going to be using the domain name of Shopify. It's good that we have it available. And the project name would also be Shopify. I'm going to be choosing the basic plan over here. And please use the promo code that you have in the description below. Please use the promo code, select the period, and then click on apply. That's all. It's as simple as that to create a new project. And as you can see, we have all these features available for our account. We have 2 administrators, 500 requests per second, 5,000 database records, and many more. So I'm going to create this project now. As you can see, the project is being created. It's going to take some time to create the project. In the meanwhile, please do check out all our courses on LearnYard. Now that we have the project ready, let's click on the project. As you can see, we have all the details over here. Click on access and you should be able to find the account, the URL of your project. So click on the URL. The details to this should be received on your email. So just check your email to find the same. As you can see, we have received the credentials on the email. I'm going to log into the project now. And the password should also be put over here and enter. So this is your portal where you can edit your project. As you can see, we have a couple of things over here: menu, pages, and catalog. We're going to be creating pages for our project now. So click on pages. And the first thing that we would need to do is create a home page of sort. So I'm just going to use a usual page. I'm going to call it home. And the home URL could also be home. So essentially this is the API URL to which you would hit to get the details of this page. And the name of the item is also home. I'm just going to leave it as such for now. Let's quickly create a couple of more pages. Let's create a page for our sneakers. So I'm going to create a catalog page and I'm going to call it all products. And the URL, I'm just going to call it products and all products. So we have the all products page ready. Please ensure that your page is saved here. It's an auto save mechanism, but you would need to wait just a second to get it saved. Once your page is saved, let's create a couple of more pages for our categories. That would be sneakers and boots, right? So let's create a couple of more category pages for boots. So I'm just going to create boots and another for sneakers. Awesome. We have our pages ready. The next thing that we'll be doing is adding products. But before that, we would also need to create the attributes. That's essentially creating the schema for our APIs, for our data. So go to settings and click on attributes. It should be a unique attribute. So I'm just going to call it shoe attribute. And the marker could be the same. And this is for products. And I'm going to create this attribute. Let's edit this to add our schema. We would need a title. And the marker would be title. And the type of this would be a string, right? So the title of the card. So essentially what we are building here is the shoe card. So the details that we need for the shoe card. So the shoe card had an image, a title, a description, and a price, right? So, and also a type. So is it a sneaker or it's a boot, right? So we are just going to create those schemas right now. So we have created a title and a description. So the marker is also going to be description, and type would again be string. Create. We would need a price, and the type now would be a float, right? So click on the right type here. So it's very important to select the right type and the name and the marker for your attribute. The next thing I would like to have is the image attribute. So the marker would also be image, and the type of this would be image, and create. And I also need a type, essentially to identify whether it's a sneaker or a boot. So I'm just going to call this as type, and this would be this would actually be a string as well. And I also want to add a color attribute just in case. And the color attribute could be a list, because a same shoe could be available in different colors, right? The same product could be available in different colors, right? So we would have this as a list. So I'm just going to create it. But for color, we would also need to edit that list. So in here, I clicked on settings, and I'm going to call this red, and value would be red. I'm just going to add a couple of colors just in case. So I'm just going to call white and purple, yellow, some of the common colors that shoe comes in, right? So I'm just adding a couple of colors over there, blue, etc. I think that's good enough for our application. So essentially what I have done right now is I have marked the color as a list, and the options are red, white, purple, yellow, and blue, right? So this is how you create your attributes. Please ensure that it's saved and it is mapped to products. So this attribute is for products. So please ensure that you have created the It's for products, as you can see, and it's created properly. Now we're going to create the products. So next to, in the catalog, next to all products, you should be able to see the plus icon. So I have a couple of images ready. I have downloaded some assets for ourselves to be able to create this project. So as you can see, I have this image of Air Jordan black shoe and a couple of others like that. So I'm going to call this Air Jordan 3 black. And in categories, I want this to be a part of sneakers as well. So I'm going to select sneakers. In attributes, let's select the attribute set that we just created. So that's the shoe attribute, right? So I'm just saying that, hey, this is a new product and the schema is shoe attribute. So I have created the shoe attribute over here. So what is going to be my title over here? It's going to be Air Jordan 3 black. And the description is going to be Air Jordan black sneaker shoes. Price, I'm going to call it 4,999. And now we have to upload the images. So click on this and it should have your assets over here. So I have assets. In assets, I'm going to select this asset. So I have uploaded the image. As you can see, optimize uploaded images as well. So the type of this would be sneakers. So I'm creating this type as sneakers. And the color, I'm just going to call it white and black. It was white and black, so I'm just going to call white over here. We can create new colors as well, so whatever suits and fits your need. As you can see, we have added the new product over here, and you can see it both in sneakers and you can also see it in the all product section as well. All the other products really quickly. Air Jordan 6 white. I'm going to create a couple of boots too. I'm going to randomly call them as boots and sneakers just for the segregation for our project where we have the menus, so we need to have two separate differentiation. But you can create it as per your liking. So I'm just going to call this as boots, and I'm going to make the price 8,999 over here. So here I'm going to make the type as boots. And in the categories, select boots as well. Select boots as the type. We have a couple more to finish. And the last one, before leaving OneEntry, is that we need to go to app tokens. So go to settings and click on app token. So I'm going to call this Shopify, and I'm going to create, so just ensure that your expiry token is far off from where it's now. So this token is going to expire on 12/6 to 1 year from now approximately, right? So I'm just going to create an app token here. Once this token is created, just click on this to view your token and copy the token. Awesome. Now getting to the code. So to access this token, I'm going to be using an environment variable. So I'm going to create .env.local. So we'll be making some changes on this later, but for now I'm just going to create an environment variable, and I'm going to call this React app OneEntry token. Anything of your choice is fine. So I'm just going to call this React App OneEntry token. I'm just going to paste it over here. Now this is going to be my token to access and be able to make API calls to OneEntry. Starting with the application. So I'm just going to fire up the application real quick. So I think it looks like we already have the application open. So let's just open localhost 3000 and we should be able to see the application running. Awesome. So let's open the base application file. So that's the index.tsx file. So the index.tsx file is the root of the application, which is wrapping around the app itself, right? So going to the app.tsx, we have all this code over here. So we have the code of what is being displayed on the screen, but we don't need any of this, right? So I'm just going to delete some of this code for now. So I'm just going to delete the logo. I don't think I need this as well. For now, we can just delete this off. We can add them back when we need them. I'm going to remove the tests for now as well. And I don't need the React logos too. So I'm going to remove the logos as well. So in here, so I have the index.file. So this is the root file of the application. And let's move to app.tsx, and I'm going to remove the dependencies that we don't need. And I'm going to remove everything inside of this header. I'm just going to call this as a h2 tag. So let's just create an h2 tag. So to create a tag real quick, if you just type h2 like this on VS Code, you should be able to get the hint. And I'm just going to call it Shopify. So now we should be able to see this on the screen. Excellent. We are facing some errors right now. So facing errors in an application is common. You're going to face errors when you're going to build something. So we see that module not found on report web vitals. That's something that we just deleted, right? Inside of index.tsx. So let's go to index.tsx and remove the dependencies that are not present right now. So we're just going to remove this for now. So you see Shopify is coming on the screen, and we also want to change this from React app to something else, right? So I'm just going to go to the index.html file, and you should have the title as React app here. I'm going to change this to Shopify. So now this has changed to Shopify. Come back. Let's continue building the project. So let's take a quick look at the final product. So we see that we have the title initially, and then it floats up to the top with an animation, right? So let's start building that. So as we can see, we have the title currently over here. We also see that the font size is pretty big than what we want. So let's try changing that. Initially, we can see that we have a div wrapping around the whole application, and then we have a header, and then we have a class name. We need to ensure that the class names are in small letters. So I'm just going to quickly change this to small letters in class names, and here as well. And we don't have an app logo anymore, so let me just quickly remove that. Same here, change it to small letters, and app link as well, change it to small letters. Okay, so currently we have an issue because I have not saved the application, and we are back. Now we need to have a state to let the application know that the final state is at the top and the initial state is the initial state that is not at the top. We need a new state, and I'm going to call that state as eStop. So I'm going to define a new state called as eStop, and I'm going to import useState from React. So I'm going to update my imports here, and then I have defined my state. So essentially eStop here is the final state, is the current state, as in I'm giving the initial state as false. So to let them know, let the application know that the initial state is not at the top, but after a certain condition is triggered, it will become true, which will let the application know that it is at the top. So automatically it's a one-side data rendering, one-side data flow. Hence automatically there is a React engine that detects that the state has changed and it will update the state of the application. Now I'm going to use eStop to ensure that a couple of classes are added that make the title move to the top, right? So I'm going to say class name. I don't want it just to be a string. I will need a template literal, so I'm going to use a template literal to give an initial class of title. So that is going to be the class that I'm going to use to define my initial state. Once I have that state, I'm going to say, hey, eStop is true. Is it true? It's a ternary statement that I'm going to be using here. So I'm going to say eStop is true, then add something like a new class over there, right? So I'm going to add the class name as stop, and if it's not, then just let it as is. Just let it be as is, right? So now we need to define these classes, though we don't have these classes defined over here. So I'm going to say title. And how do we want the initial state of the application to be? That is what the title would be. As you can see, this floats to the top. So this is not a part of the header. This is going to be staying in a layer above the header, right? So that's why I need the positioning to be absolute positioning. So I'm going to say position is going to be absolute. I want a transition on this, but I'm going to add it later. I'm going to say the font size, I'm going to make it like 1.4 em. I'm just going to keep it as 1.4 em. Let's just check how it looks like. I think it's still too big. Maybe I can just, my bad. Let me move it over here. So font size is going to be 1.4 em. Yeah, I think that pretty much looks good, but probably even a bit smaller would do. So I'm just going to say 1.1 em. Yeah, that pretty much looks as the final state, right? So initial state of our application, where it starts from. Yeah, that's pretty much the font size that we need. So once we add the font size, we can say that, you know, what is the positioning from the top that I need? I'm going to say around 40% for now. So this is the initial positioning, and left I would want it to be 50%. But I want to move it and make it perfectly centered. So I'm going to use a transform translate property here to make it -50, -50. This should center the title right where we need it to. Does it look more and more like the final state of the application? Yes, right, except for the glow. We'll work on that. Now we have this state. Next thing that we would need to do is we would need to have a sparkle shadow for this, and we would need to ensure that it glows like a light bulb. So I have this text shadow property that I'm going to be adding over here. So there are multiple states that I would need it to glow in, right? So multiple different variants of multiple different states of the text shadow. So I'm going to add a text shadow property to get that light bulb effect. So I'm going to be adding this code over here to add the text shadow. So as you can see, it starts glowing right now. So this looks like the initial state of the application, right? This pretty much looks like the initial state of the application. Now the next thing that we would need to do is we would need to say that, hey, the eStop should be true after a certain period of time, right? So what is that event? So I'm going to introduce use effect here. So use effect, I'm going to say that after a certain condition, I would need the eStop to become true. So let's do that now. So in the move to top function, I'm going to be setting the top property to true after a set timeout. So I'm going to call set timeout, and let's just set move to top, set eStop to be true, and let's just do it after, say, 1 second or so. I think that should be good, right? So let's see what's going to do now. So I'm just going to call this inside of the use effect now, so that we have a hook tied up to it. So I'm going to call move to top inside of use effect. With this change, I need to give a dependency to use effect. If there is no dependency array, that means it is equivalent to component did mount. So as you can see, I have added the move to top to the I have added the state of move to top. This must be adding the top class over here, but we still haven't defined the top class. Yes, you can see this. So initial state, there is no top class, but then it gets added. All good. So that part is working fine, but we haven't defined the top class, right? So let's just quickly define what the top class is going to do. I'm going to add the top class now. So let's define the top class. The class name is going to be top, and I'm going to add top is equal to 0%, 0, just 0 is fine. Left is 50%, right? And let's see how it's going to look like. Yes, that pretty much is doing what we need to, but there is no animation yet. So what we need next is we need to give the proper colors and states for this. So I'm going to change the font size. So I'm going to increase the font size by a bit over here. So let the final state of the application have a bigger font size, right? Because that is what we did here. So as you can see, the initially it just grows in size, right? So that is what I want. So it's glowing, then it gets a constant color, but it grows in size with respect to font size. So I have increased. So essentially what's happening over here is the initial font size is 1.1 em and the final font size is 1.4 em. So it's going to transition between this font size before it reaches the top. So as you can see, the moment it moves to the top, it's bigger. You will see the transition clearly once we have it. I want an animation over here. So before adding an animation, so let's remove this current animation that we don't need. I'm just going to edit this rather. So I'm going to add a new animation. So let's call it light bulb. So I'm going to add a light bulb animation. From where? So the from state would be, the color would be white. So I want the color to be white initially, right? That's the color that we initially had. And the text shadow is something that I would want to have, and then I would want to remove it as we go to the top. So let's quickly do that. So I have the text shadow class over here. So I'm going to add the text shadow class to the from property. And in the to property, I do not want the text shadow, but rather what I want is I want a yellowish color there. So the yellowish shade I'm going to be using is this. So let's see how it looks like. I haven't used the light bulb animation right now. So let me add the animation in here to the top class. So I'm going to say animation is going to be light bulb animation, and I want it to be 1 second forwards. Okay, so let's see how it looks like. Looks like it's not properly aligned here. So let's fix that. I think it's because we don't have a transform translate property here. So let's add the transform translate property of minus 50%. Let's see how it looks like. We still have an issue. That pretty much is the final state. So that is pretty much the final state that we need. So we have added the yellow color. So let's remove the text shadow in the final state. So we don't need the text shadow in the final state, right? Because as you have seen, there is no text shadow in the final state. So let's remove that. And in the title, we also need to add the animation that I was telling you about. So we need to add the animation. So I'm going to add a transition over here. Transition, I'm going to have the transition, all of them, 1 second, and just ease. Okay, let's see how it looks like now. Yes, that's pretty much what we are looking for, right? So that's pretty much the animation that we were looking for. The one quick fix that we had to do here was to change the font to font size. So please ensure you fix that in your code as well. So let's continue building the application. This is the current state of the application that we have right now. Next thing we would need to do is set up the authentication and start getting the data from the backend. So I'm going to start creating the proper folder structure for the application here. So let's remove these redundant files for now. Inside of the source, I'm going to create a new folder called as services. Inside of the service, I'm going to create a new file called as api.ts. Okay, so this is where we are going to make our API calls, fetch the data. It's going to be sort of a util for us to be used wherever we need to fetch our data. Cool. OneEntry has given us a npm package called as OneEntry itself. npm OneEntry. If you search for it, you should be able to find it over here. So in here, just search for OneEntry. So this is the one we need. So this helps us get the basic utils and the API setup. It gives us some util functions to make the API call and simplify the process. So let's just copy this command over here and install this in our project. So npm I OneEntry. Okay, so we have installed the dependency. So this dependency can be seen in our package.json now. So just go and check your diff, and in package.json you should be able to see this. Perfect. Now that we have it, let's start writing the code. Inside of here, so if you come to the documentation, they have given us all the APIs that are available that we can use to fetch the data. So what we would need here is to fetch all the products and the menus, right? So as you see, we will be making two API calls, one to fetch this menu and one to fetch the actual products over here. So let's start writing that. What we would need to do is write define OneEntry, and inside of OneEntry, we are going to be passing a couple of things. We would need to pass the base URL, and we would also need to pass the token. So these things should not be living in the services. So we should be adding a new folder at this moment. So that will be called configs. And inside of the configs, I'm going to add a config.js file. Just going to call it config.js for now. Config.ts rather. And inside of the config.ts, let's just add our base URL. So what is our base URL? So if you go back here, so the base URL for my application would be this shopify.oneentry.cloud. So I'm going to bring this URL over here, and I'm going to create a configuration object. So, and I'm going to call this as my base URL. So base URL would be, so let's just replace the base URL with what we got from the URL there. So this is right for us. Just close this. So as you can see, I have exported this from here. So good idea is always to define a config with an interface. So I'm going to be adding an iconfig ts file here. So let's just quickly add the iconfig ts file. This is the power of TypeScript. So let's leverage that to the fullest, right? So we need to ensure that nothing goes wrong. So what could go wrong over here is that if you do not give a type, anybody can add any number of configs, right? So it should always be of type iconfig. So that helps you to also retrieve the data, to have a quick look at what the configurations have for us. So it's nothing but an interface for the data that we just created. So I'm going to call export interface iconfig, right? And it has a base URL, and that's a string. Perfect. And the type of this would be, you guessed it, iconfig. So let's just import iconfig. Perfect. So now we have the configs over here. I'm going to be taking the token from my OneEntry token over here. So my OneEntry token is in the env file, so .env.local file. So for the local, I'm going to be using the environment variables to fetch my token. So in here, now we can say that, hey, define OneEntry, and I'm going to be fetching the URL from the configurations now. So let's fetch the URL. So let's just say, what did we call it again? We called it config, right? So let's just say config.base URL. And now we need to import configs from here. So it has given us a great suggestion. And then the second parameter that we would need to give is a token. And that token would be nothing but the environment token that we have given. So let's use the environment token that we had given. So the way to fetch it would be something like this. So let's just ensure if that is the name of the token here. No. So let me just fetch the right name of my token and paste it over here. Yep. So now I should be able to register myself, and that is the authentication URL and the authentication that I need to fetch the data from my OneEntry CMS. So this gives us a couple of things. So it's always a good idea to take a peek and see what this is going to return us. So always it's a good habit to always understand what the return type is. So the return type has pages, the return type has products for us, and it also has the menus. So we are looking for products and menus. So I'm going to use that over here. So let's destructure it. So I'm going to say products and then the menus. and I have destructured these two from the OneEntry define OneEntry function. Okay, define OneEntry functions response. So now let's start using this. So let's try to get all our products. So let's start creating the get all products function. So the first thing that we would need to do is create a function, create export async function get products. It pretty much knows me now. So that's the GitHub Copilot doing its magic. So in here, we are going to wrap this around the try catch block. So let's quickly use the try catch block. So I'm going to call this as products, and this is of the same type. So I products entity array. So this is going to be of type I products entity array, and we'll get the products. And then once we have the products, we will return these products. And if something goes wrong over here, we are going to log the error over here and rethrow the error. So console.error, we will log the error, and then we will throw the error again. Great. That is how you fetch the products from your API. Let's quickly check this out by console logging it. So let's just console log the response, console log of products. And I'm going to import this. For now, I'm just going to call this inside of app.tsx. This is not the right way to do it, of course, but we are just going to do it right now to check if we are able to get our data from the backend. So I'm just going to call this over here, and let's just check our console. So in the console, we should be able to get the data. We have an error. So let's try to figure out what is going wrong for us. Not an error while trying to make the API call. The reason for that was because in the latest version of the npm package of OneEntry, there seems to be a bug. We are going to step down to the version that is working fine, which is stable. So I have stepped down to 1.0.68. So at the time of watching this video, try to install the latest version of OneEntry, and if it works fine, all good. If not, you can always step down to 1.0.68 to ensure that it's working fine. As you can see, this is what we are going to build, and all this data is coming from that API response. So as you can see, all this API response is present here, right? So we are going to use that to build the cool UI, the final UI that we are going to build. Okay, so continuing to build the application. So the next thing that we need to do is to make the API call to fetch the menus. So this is the menu here. So let's make a quick API call to fetch the menus as well. So to get the menu, I'm going to create an async function here. Export async function. Export get menus. And here we would need to pass the main URL. So the main marker, as we call it. So I'm going to call it marker, which is going to be a string. And the return type, as before, is a promise. I'm just going to keep it as any for now. And we are going to make the API call, right? So the menus will be of type iMenuEntity. So you can figure this out by checking the get menus by marker functions return method. So the return type. So in get menus by marker, the return type is iMenuEntity. So we would need to give the same here. So if I can just write this correctly, and this is of type iMenuEntity, and this is not going to be an array. Instead, it's just going to be of type iMenuEntity. Let's close the function, and that should do. I think I have misspelled async here, so let's just fix that. Perfect. Now I'm going to wrap this inside of a try catch block like before to ensure that we catch any errors, any unseen errors that may happen, and then we will be rethrowing the errors as well. In case this is right, and then we will just return the menus from this function. Let's check what is the so it says unreachable code. So that is because I have removed a parenthesis over here, so that should fix it. Great. So now we have received the menus as well. Now I'm going to create a couple of custom hooks which I can use wherever I need to get this. So it's important to create the right folder structure in your application. So to do that, I'm going to call this as common. So anything common like utils would come here as well. We would not be creating any utils for now, but we still need to maintain the right practices of developing a folder structure, of developing a React application. Instead of this, I'm going to call this use fetch menus maybe. So we can just call it use fetch menus. Okay, and this is nothing but a function export const use fetch menus, right? It does not take in the marker though, so it's going to be a normal function. So I'm going to create a state here called as menus and set menu. So this is not going to be of type any. Instead, I'm going to call this, I'm going to use the actual type of this. So that is iMenus entity. Okay. So we have iMenus entity here, and the initial state of this is going to be null. The initial state is going to be null. So we also have to modify the type, saying that it could be iMenus entity or null. Then we also need the loading state, and that's going to be a boolean, which is going to be a false. Now let's create, let's actually call the API. So that is nothing but a use effect over here. So we're going to use effect, and then the first thing that's going to happen is set it to true, right? And then we are going to get the menus. So we'll get the menus from our api.ts. So let's just open this on another tab here. So I called it get menus. So we can get back to use fetch menus, and let's just make the API call. So I'm going to import it and then, so just call the function, and then it needs the marker, which is going to be main by default, then, and let's just call the menus and then set the menus. Okay, so use effect also needs to be closed here. So let's just close use effect as well, and the dependency for use effect is going to be empty because we do want to call it on load. So the other thing that we would need to do is return the menus and loading from here. Now we are going to use this custom hook instead in app.tsx, and let's just take a look what's going to happen. So let's just go to app.tsx again, and so in app.tsx we are going to use our custom hook. So let me just import and use the custom hook menus, and that would be use fetch menus. So we would need to import this as well. So I have imported it now, and inside here I'm just going to console log the menus. So let's see if that works. Looks like we have an error again. Let's check what the error is. I think I have missed a parenthesis somewhere. So it looks like in api.ts I have made an error while creating this function. Right? So that was the error over here. We still face an issue. As you can see, we got an error that menu is not found. Let's debug it quickly. Looks like we have not created a menu over here in OneEntry. So getting back to OneEntry, let's create a menu real quick. If you don't find the menu option over here, go to settings and enable menu. So you should be able to see that option here in the navigation bar. Go to menu and create a new menu called as main, and let's add it. Now let's edit it and say that we need to enable all these menus over here. So that would be all products, sneakers, and boots. So these are the three menus that we would need. Now that we have done that, let's get back to our API call, and as you can see, the main menu, the menus are now present. We should be able to see them in the network tab as well, and we indeed get three menus over here, one called as products, sneakers, and boots. Create a custom hook for products as well. So I'm going to repeat the process here. So use fetch products .ts. So I'm going to call this use fetch products.ts. Let's copy this from here, and also change the states over here. So this will now become products, and this will be set products. This is of type products iProducts entity array, and the initial state would be an empty array. So I'm just going to make this an empty array here. This would be set products. If I could just spell that right, set products. And this would be loading again. And then in here, we would be calling products, get products instead. So as you can see, the function name is get products. It does not need any inputs, any parameters. And this would be products now. And in here, set products to products. You would need to import products from the API and return products and loading. Let's remove the unused imports over here. That should be our products custom hooks. So I'm going to call this use fetch products. Let's import it in app.tsx. Great. Now we're going to print this as well to ensure that it's working fine. Indeed, it is working fine. We have 13 products over here. Let's build the layout now. So to build the layout, we need to ensure that the app header minimizes after a certain period of time. So after 1 second, as of now, this moves to the top, right? But now we need to also ensure that the header minimizes after that period of time. So let's build that now. So I'm going to introduce a new state over here called as is layout rendered, and this will be set is layout rendered. And let's use this now. So before using it, we also need to ensure that. So let's do the same to render the layout. So I'm going to create the function again. So I'm going to call this set layout, and I'm going to call this set is layout rendered to true, and I'm going to do that after 2000 seconds. So this also has a timer. I'm also going to add a timer over here. Let's return this. Let's do the same over here as well. Great. Now I'm going to assign this to the timer over here. So I'm going to call this timer, and let's also call the layout. So layout timer, set layout. Perfect. Let's also clear this out when the component lifecycle ends. That's perfect. So we have ensured to clear the timeout here. So let's build the nav container now. For the same, I'm going to be creating a new component called as nav. So let's create the folder structure here for components. So I'm going to add a new folder over here called as components, and inside of components I'm going to create another folder, and I'm going to call it as nav. Inside of nav I'm going to have two files, nav.tsx and nav.css. Okay, so inside of the nav.tsx, let's start building the nav component. Export function nav, and it could take some props. Yeah, the props that we would need here is the menus actually. So I'm just going to take the menus from here. So I'm just going to call this data for now, and that would be I menu pages, right? So that would be I menu pages array, an array of I menu pages. Perfect. Now I'm just going to use data. From the data, so we are going to extract data from the props here. That means we would need to pass data as a prop to the nav component when we use it. So let's create the TSX. So I'm going to be using a nav here. I'm going to add a class name to nav as called as nav. Inside of the unordered list, let's loop through the data and each item is a page, and then we would return the template from there, and the template would be a list element. The template would be a list element, and the list element would have a link element with a to parameter which is the redirect to the path when we click on it, and we would say page dot page URL, which is from the API as we saw earlier, and the title would be page dot, let's just check the API, localize infos dot menu title. Link is not present, so we need to import it now. So to import, we need to install React Router DOM, React Router DOM. Let's import it from React Router DOM like that. Now we also need to ensure that we wrap the whole of our application with browser router. So inside of the index.tsx, please ensure that you wrap your whole of your application with browser router. Else you would be getting an error. So please ensure that you wrap your application with the browser router. Let me start the application again. Let's see how it looks like now. As you can see, 3 of the lists are rendered on the screen. Let's style this now. Let's style this now. Inside of our app.tsx, we have imported nav and we have rendered it inside of the nav container now. So let's give it a class. So we want to show the nav container only after it's rendered, and also before that, quickly let's also set up the layout, right? So the header needs to be minimized after the layout is rendered. So we set the layout rendered. Let's use this now because now we will be needing this here. So once the layout is rendered, we want to minimize the header. So inside of this, I'm going to make this a template literal now. So app header, and then if the layout is rendered, add a class of app header minimized. Else we won't be doing much. Now since we have the class name of app header minimized, let's define the same. So app header minimized, I'm going to set the height to 10 VH. We have given a min height here, shouldn't be the min height, should just be height now. As you can see, it has reduced the height now. So this is all it is. Yes, we are going to build the rest of the things here. Let's quickly finish building the navigation bar. So let's add the classes for the navigation bar. So let's just render the nav tag only if the layout is rendered. So I'm just going to wrap this around and say is layout rendered, and then only render the layout navigation bar. So now you don't see it, but after the layout is rendered, you would be able to see the navigation. Now let's style the navigation. So let's go to nav.tsx. and also open nav.css over here. Let's define the classes for the same. So I want the navigation container to be of display flex and justify space between them. Align item center as well to center them vertically. I'm going to add a padding around them of around 1 rem, 2 rem. Background color I'm going to inherit. That means the parent background color. And then the color of the text, I want it to be white. Let's see how it looks now. So let's remove the default styles from there. I'm going to give display flex to this as well. Flex direction should be row. And list style is none. Let's refresh the page. As you can see, I have not imported the CSS file here. Let's quickly import that. Okay, so here we are now. So the color, I want the color to be white. So I'm going to say the nav tag, and inside of that, I want the anchor tags to have the color of white. And I want to remove the text decoration on them. So text decoration would be none. Let's see. Yes, looking more like it. Now let's reduce the font size of the list items. So nav, inside of that, I would reduce the font size to say 1 rem. That's about the right size. Inside of the app container, so I would want to move this to the right side of the header, right? So we would want it somewhere over here. So you see in the prod application, it is somewhere over here. So let's try to move it over there. So for the nav container, let's apply some classes. So in here, I'm going to say nav container. I want the width to be 100%. I want display flex over here. I'm going to add display flex over here and justify content to flex end. And I want to add a simple animation on this. So the animation would be to get a fade in. So let me add those animations over here real quick. I'm going to call this as fade in, and from, I want the opacity to be 0 initially. That means there is nothing, it's not visible initially. And then I'm going to transform translate, say something around 20 pixels. And then 2, opacity 1 here, that means it's perfectly visible. And transform translate, it should be actually translate Y. And I want this to be transform translate, my bad, transform translate to 0. Great. Let's use this animation now. Let's use this transition inside of the nav container. I'm going to say animation. I want to use the fade in animation, 1 second ease and forwards. Isn't that awesome? So you see the animation over here, and then it would fade in into it. So when we click on it now, nothing is going to happen, of course, but we will build that in a while. So as you can see, we have the application loading with the cool animation, and you can see the 3 nav bars over here. Next, let's build the body of the application. So let's capitalize the first letters of these menu items over here. So to do the same, I'm going to create a util folder inside of the common folders. So I'm just going to call this utils, and let's create a util file, and in here I'm going to say export function capitalize first letter. That's what we need. And once we have that, let's wrap this around the function from the util, and let's import the function, and we should be able to get the capitalized first letters now. You also see that there is a slight, it's not aligned to the nav really, isn't it? So this is an absolute positioned title over here. So let's quickly adjust the CSS to align the margin. So this is essentially because of the margin. As you can see, inside of the header we have the H2. Let's quickly check and adjust what's the right margin for the same. So in here I'm going to say app header H2. Let's just reduce the margin to about 0.6 rem, 0.6 m, and let's see how it looks. Perfect. Now let's build the home component to render it below the header. So I'm going to create a new component inside of the components folder. So let's create the home component, and inside of that, you guessed it, I'm going to create two files, home.tsx, not ts, tsx, and home.css. Inside of the home.tsx, let's define the component. So export function home, and this home component would return, for now we'll just return a div. My bad, div, and let's just call this home. Let's import it inside of the app.tsx, and let's just try to render it below the header for now. And import the component from there. Yes, perfect. We have the whole component being rendered over here. Let's style this accordingly. And inside of the home.tsx, we will also need to pass the products, by the way. So inside of the app.tsx, I'm going to create a new wrapper, and I'm going to call this as let's call this app content. And this app content is essentially what is going to host the cards and everything else. So inside of this, I'm going to render the home now. Great. But we also need to ensure that the app content is taking the proper styles. So we need to take the rest of the height here. So inside of app.tsx, app.css, sorry. So I'm going to say styles for app content. So let's add the app content styles over here. So a couple of styles that we need to add. Background color, we're going to keep the same background color. Let's add display flex. Flex direction needs to be column. Align item center, justify content center. Font size, let's make it around let's make it a bit dynamic. So I'm going to just make it 10 pixels plus 2 vmin, and I want the color to be white, and the min height, So the min height would be the height of the whole view height minus the header. So the header was 10 VH. So we're going to say 100 VH minus 10 VH. Oh yeah. Perfect. Now the whole app starts blending in, right? In the home.tsx, we have added the home.tsx. Let's try to render the cards inside of this. So to render the cards, we need to, let me remove this, and I'm going to wrap it around a class, and I'm going to call it wrapper. And inside of the wrapper, I need to loop through the products. But I don't have the products yet. So that means we need to pass products as a prop to home. So let's pass products to home. So inside of here, I'm going to say products. And products is going to be of type iProducts entity. We're going to import the type over here. It's going to be iProducts entity array actually, because we will have multiple products inside of it. Let's quickly go to app.tsx and let's pass this. So let's call products is equal to products. So we have passed the products over here. Let's loop through the products. So products.map, and each one of them is a product. And for each product, let's return the card component. And the card will have a key of product, and we'll be passing product into it. The card component currently does not exist. So let's go create the card component now. So to create the card component, we'll create a new folder inside of components called as card. And then card.tsx, and card.css. So let's create the components. Export function card, and this we already know is going to take a product, and that is of product entity. So let's import iProduct entity here. Perfect. And in here, for now, I'm just going to return a div which says I'm a card or whatever. So it's I am a card. Okay. And in here, let's import the card component. Let's try to see how it looks like. So as you can see, for each of the card, so each of the product right now, we are able to render the card. So now let's create the card component and render the product. Let's quickly build the card. Before that, I would like to add the return statement inside of the use effect to clean up after itself. So return statement, and then we'll clear it out. To check the API response here, I'll be printing the products here. So let's quickly print the products. So as we can see, we have 13 products coming up. Let's build the card accordingly. So to build a card, let me move on to the card component. So inside of the card component, I'm a card needs to go away now. That was our hello world for cards. So inside of this, we will name the class as card. So class name will be card here. And then we will just render an image. So we need an image, right? So the image tag will be, so I'll give the class name of image for now. So let's just name this as image. Then we need a card body. So I'm going to call this as card body. And then inside of the card body, as you can see, we have the card title, card description, and price. So inside here, I'm going to say card title. So card title could probably be an H5 or something. So let's give it as an H5, and I'm going to call this as card title. This is my card title, and we'll give the info later on. And then I'll use a P tag for description. So I'm going to call this as card description. Inside of that, we'll be printing the description. So essentially this part, so purple sneakers, right? So that is what we'll be printing over there. And then we need a card price. So I'm going to use a P tag for card price as well. Okay, cool. Now, based on the product, let's utilize the data in the API and add the data in there. So to do that, inside of the card image, so I need to give a source for the card. So the source for the card would be product. So quickly, let's just take a look at the API. Product.attributeValues.image.value.download link, right? So let's do that. Product.attributeValues.image.value, was it values? Image.value, so image.value.download link. So I'm just going to copy it from here. So download link. Okay. And then inside of the H5, so for the card title, let's print the card title. So the title is inside of the localize infos. So product.localize infos. So product.localize infos dot title. So let's just use that. And for an image, we need to give an alt as well for fallback. Just going to call this product card. And then inside of the description, let's print the description. It should be in the attributes again. So inside of the attributes, we have description over here, and description has value. So at product.attributeValues.description.value. So product.attributeValues.description.value. Similarly for price as well. So we don't have a currency here. So let's just use the rupee currency. So I'm just going to copy the rupee character over here. So let's see how it looks like now. So we have some errors. So undefined reading the property of value. So looks like the value is not present for some of them. So probably for price, I'm guessing. So price dot value. Okay. So we got the error for value, right? So let me just ensure that these values are present. So I'm going to be ensuring that all these values are present here. Now with this, we should be able to get our value. Yes, right. So we are able to get our values on the screen. Now essentially all these are single cards over here. So we'll manage with CSS and we'll render these cards now. So let's continue building the card components. Let's start adding the styles for the card. So I'm going to say that the card should have around 300 pixels in width, probably, right? So that's the decent width for a card. So the class is card, and I'm going to say width is around 300 pixels. And then I want a border for it. So as you see in here, we have a small border in here. So let's add that small border. So I'm going to say 1 pixel solid a grayish border over there. And then the border radius is something I want around 8 pixels to give the border radius. Let me give a margin of around 20 pixels, and then let me add a box shadow around the card. So I'm going to add a box shadow, and the box shadow is going to be 0, 4 pixels, 6 pixels, and RGBA 0.1. I think that's pretty decent. And then let's make the height to be 600 pixels and not more than that. And overflow Y, I would want it to be hidden. There is anything overflowing. As you can see, we have not imported the card CSS. So let's import the card.css, and we can see that it is broken, but pretty much the outside of the card pretty much looks like the final card over here. So let's continue. So for the image, I'm going to be adding width of 100%, but height of auto, I'm going to give an auto height. Object fit, I want it to not take too much, so it's okay to give object fit cover. Max height is something that I want it to take not more than 300 pixels. So I'm going to say border top radius, I want it to be 8 pixel, and border top right radius to also be 8 pixels. Let's check now. Yes, now it's pretty much looking, the images are right slapping inside of the card slot. So let's start adding the styles for card body. So card body would have a padding of 20 pixels. I'm going to say display flex. Display flex. Flex direction needs to be column because we need to stack them up, right? So we need the flex direction to be column here. And then I'm going to give a gap between them. So the gap is around 12 pixels. And align item center. Let's see how it looks. Yes, pretty much how we want it to be. As you can see, there is still an issue. We are going to fix it. And then for the card title, so we have the card title. Let's give a font size of around 0.8 em. 0.8 em for the font size of card title. And I want to remove the margin here. And I also want to give a height of 60 pixels to it. So essentially I'm doing this to ensure that it does not, so when we align them side by side, I don't want them to be at different heights. So that's why I'm doing it right now. Okay, so let's remove the object fit cover here. We don't want the object fit cover. Okay, to the card body, I'm going to give a height, max height of 100%. Let's start adding the styles for card description. So the card description should have a font size of around 0.6 em. So it's essentially smaller than the title. And I'm going to give a grayish color here. So let's just say 555. And margin could be 0. And height, I'm going to give it 50 pixels. Okay, so now let's check how it looks like. Okay, it has been applied. For the card price, so as you can see in the final application, we have the card price to be in a reddish color here. So the card price, it's bigger, so it needs to be around, okay, 0.1 em works for me. Let's remove the margin as well, and I want the font weight to be bold, and then I want the color to be an attractive color. So I'm going to add a specific color over here. Color, going to use this color. And margin top, I'm just going to add around 10 pixels of margin. Yes. So now this pretty much looks like our card, the final card. So now we have added the price for the card and we can see the change on the UI. Now let's add this hover animation on the card that we have on the final app. So let's do that. So to do that, I would need to add a animation here. So two things really. One is the zoom in animation and one is the hover animation. So this is the zoom in animation and this is the hover animation. Let's work on both of them. So at keyframes, I'm going to call this the zoom in animation. So from transform, say scale of 0.5, let's scale to transform scale 1. Okay, and let's use that on the load of the card. So that would be animation, and I want it to be 1 second, ease forwards. Let's see how it looks like. Looks like it's not working yet. So I have given the zoom in animation over here. Okay, the animation doesn't seem to be working. The reason is because the layout is getting rendered even before we have the other animations, the title animation, etc. So we want it to render only after the app content to render only after the layout is rendered. So let's quickly add that condition now and let's reload. Now we should be able to see the animation. Yes, we are able to see the animation. So now let's add the hover effect. So we have this hover effect over here. So let's build that real quick. On the hover effect, so card hover, I want the scale to be 1.05, but I don't want it to happen immediately. If we don't add the transition, it's not going to be very smooth. So let me add a transition here. All 1 second, 0.5 second ease would work for me. Yes, that's beautiful, right? Now let's also add a box shadow. So I have a cool effect that I have created already for box shadow. So I'm going to grab it over here. Yes. So that is the box shadow for the card. Now we also have this cart icon over here. So that comes up only when we hover on the card. So let me add the cart icon. So I have a button that I'm going and an SVG which I'm going to be using over here. So after the price, I'm going to add this SVG over here, which is the cart SVG, and as you can see, it's coming up over here. Let's fix that. So we don't need it to come up when we are not hovering on the card. So we first need to add a class for it. So let's call this button the add to cart button that we already have here. So for the add to cart button, my bad. So for the add to cart button, the initial state of visibility will be hidden. Visibility will be hidden. I'm going to remove the border. I'm going to use the background as inherit. So it blends in. And I want the cursor as pointer. Let's see how it looks like. Hasn't worked yet. So we have an issue here, invalid DOM property at stroke line, etc., etc. So we need to ensure, so I also want to ensure that the SVG has a fill of white. So let's quickly add that as well. And so I've made a small mistake here. I've called it add to cart button. So let's just make it add to cart. And the final state of the SVG would be on hover, we want it to be visible, right? So I want to make it visible, and the fill is already white. So the fill is not given right now. So let's just remove this from here and just say fill /5. That should do the trick. As you can see, now this has come, and when you hover on it, it has the cursor pointer on it. Let's also quickly ensure that we move the cart icon to the bottom. So I want to give a margin on the cart. So I'm going to just add a quick margin over here. Margin top of around 20 pixels should do. So I think that pretty much looks how we want it to be. Great. Now let's render the layout properly. So we need all of this to be rendered right. So in the home.tsx, now we have all of them rendering vertically stacked up. So let's quickly define the classes that we need to. So let's quickly add the classes for the wrapper. So for the wrapper, display should be flex, and I want the flex direction to be row right now, so it should move horizontally. So flex direction would be row. I'm going to say flex wrap. Align item center as well. And then I want the height to be auto. Let's quickly check it out. Looks like I have not imported the home CSS in here. So I'm importing it right now. And now, as you can see, all the products are listed here with the animations, and the initial rendering animations will also work fine. Now, in here, we have the three categories: boots, sneakers, and all products. When clicking on the sneakers, I want to load only the sneakers. When clicking on the boots, I would like to load only the boots. And when clicking on all products, I want to load all the products again. So let's see how we can do that. So this is where you will learn routing in using React Router DOM. It's going to be very interesting to learn. Quickly, let me create a new component called as sneakers, and one more for boots. So let's quickly create these components now. So for sneakers, like usual, we are going to add two files. And sneakers.css, right? And inside of boots as well, I'm going to do the same thing, boots.tsx and boots.css. Perfect. So inside of the sneakers, let's start creating the component. So in here, let's create the component, export function sneakers, and this is going to take all products. Since we do not have a state, we are going to just run a quick filter here. If we had a state, which you will see in the future lectures, we will be able to understand how easy it becomes to set up and retrieve the data that we need. So products, in here is going to be the iProduct entity. And in here, I'm just going to call this as sneakers and set sneakers. And then we'll set it to initially to an empty array. So let's just import this really quickly. I'm going to close the braces here. So use state also needs to be imported from React. Once we do that, let's use effect and on load of the component. What we're going to do is on load of the component, we are going to find the sneakers, and then we are going to set them. So set sneakers of, we are going to filter them by the product and product.attributes.value. So we are going to find products, and in each product we have attribute values. So we have products and then we have attribute values. In them we have type.value, and then we have type.value, right? So this is what we have for set sneakers. So once we have sneakers, Okay, now that sneakers are done, let's do this really quickly for boots as well. So I'm just going to change the name here. This is going to be boots. This is going to be boots here. I don't want to hard code and check these values. So inside of common, I'm going to create a new folder called as interfaces. And in here, common interfaces .ts. And in here, let's create a quick enum. And I'm going to call it boots to be boots and sneakers to be sneakers. Export enum categories, product categories. Let's call it product type. Perfect. So now we have product type, and inside of boots, I'm going to be checking it with the product type now. So let's import product type, and then it would be boots here. So always a good idea to use enums to do such kind of things. So let's just quickly replace that in the sneakers component as well. So in here, I'm just going to change this to product type dot sneakers. Let's see how it looks now. Perfect, we don't have any errors anymore. Now, let's set up the routes. To set up the routes, let's go to app.tsx. And in here, let's set up the routes for our application. So let's import inside of this. We don't want to be rendering home component always anymore. So what we want to be doing is that we want to set up the routes that we get. So let's just import routes first. So as you can see, we need to import the routes here. Inside of the route, so let's create the route, and the path, for the root path, let's just give the home route. Let's just remove the auto suggestions here. So the element will be home over here, and we'll be passing the products. So let's see if that works. So when I go to the home, I should be able to see the home, but when I go to sneakers, it should not render anything. All products, it should not render anything. So when we go to all products, so that's essentially the all path again. So I'm just going to copy this and change this to products and slash products. I want the same home component to render. Now as you can see, it starts working. So when we go to boots, I want to load the boots component, and let's just import the boots component here. And similarly, when we go to sneakers, let's also load the sneakers component, and the path would be sneakers. Let's see what it looks like. So when I go to sneakers, it loads the sneakers. When I go to boots, the results are changed and it loads only the boots. Now, when we click on all products again, we see all the products coming on the UI. So pretty much our build is almost ready. Our final product is ready here. Let's clean up the console logs. So we have added a couple of console logs. So it's always a good idea to remove those console logs from the application. As you can see, I have added one in here. And I've added a couple of other places. Always ensure that you remove such console logs before you wrap up with your application. Now, as you can see, our final application is ready. I really hope you enjoyed building the application with me. For more such upcoming builds and more such educational videos, please follow the LearnYard channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed building the application with me. If you have any doubts, please comment your doubts on the comment section, or feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. The link will be in the description below. Thank you everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.